A global outcry after the discovery of mass graves in 2 Gaza hospitals. Israel is under pressure to provide answers, but will it? And how will it be held to account? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. More bodies have been found in mass graves in Gaza after Israeli forces withdrew from the Nasser and Al Shifa medical compounds they had besieged for weeks. The Palestinian Civil Defence says there is clear evidence the Israeli army committed crimes against humanity by carrying out summary executions. The UN and EU are calling for urgent investigations, and the US says it wants answers too. International law demands a thorough and independent inquiry to uncover the truth behind these deaths and ensure accountability. But will Israel ever be held to account for its actions in Gaza? We'll put that to our guests in a moment. First, this report from Axel Zaimovich.
A haunting sight at the Nasser medical facility in Khan Yunis, where bodies remain unclaimed. Evidence of a mass grave has come to light after the Israeli army left the compound. These are not the only victims found in Gaza. At the beginning of April, similar discoveries were made at Al Shifa Hospital, following an Israeli military operation. Satellite images confirm the existence of 2 mass graves on these hospital premises.
We feel the need to raise the alarm because clearly there have been multiple bodies discovered. We don't know how many. There are reports that some of them had their hands tied, which of course indicates serious violations of international human rights law and international humanitarian law.
Women, wounded, and older people buried deep and covered in waste are among the victims. As the bodies begin to decompose, there's a pressing call for an investigation. Experts say an independent inquiry needs a neutral party.
If you want an independent organization to do it, go to a country, if you find one that's willing to go into Gaza, that is not engaged in the conflict by the supply of arms or otherwise, and ask them if they will put together a forensic team that will go in and do the job. And I think that happened occasionally in the former Yugoslavia, where you had a great deal of mass grave work that had to be done.
Forensic investigations were conducted after mass graves were found in Srebrenica and other towns in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The International Commission on Missing Persons, initiated by former U.S. President Bill Clinton, helped in identifying victims and prosecuting war crimes. With similar investigations underway in Ukraine and Syria after the discovery of mass burial sites, many wonder if the international focus will shift to Gaza. The question is if Israel will allow impartial investigators to enter the Strip, since it already stands accused of genocide at the International Court of Justice. Addressing these mass graves is crucial not only for the families seeking closure, but for the broader goals of finding justice and preventing such acts from happening ever again. Axel Zaimovich, Al Jazeera, for Inside Story.
All right, let's go ahead and bring in our guests in Doha. Mansour Shouman, Gaza Citizen Journalist who took refuge at Nasser Hospital for months during the conflict. In The Hague, Andreas Kleiser, Director for Policy and Cooperation at the International Commission on Missing Persons. And in Geneva, Kenneth Roth, Visiting Professor at Princeton School for Public and International Affairs and the former Executive Director of Human Rights Watch. A warm welcome to you all, and thanks so much for joining us today on Inside Story. Mansour, let me start with you today. The Palestinian Civil Defence team says evidence from mass graves in the grounds of Nasser Hospital and Khan Yunis clearly shows the Israeli army carried out summary executions. You're in touch with people on the ground there. You spent so much time there yourself. What are you hearing?
What I'm hearing is that this is yet another mass grave found in another hospital in another part of Gaza Strip. We found something similar in the north of Gaza, in the middle region of Gaza, in Gaza City itself, and now we're finding it in Nasser Hospital. Around 400 bodies have now been found, covered in different kinds of plastic covers, different colors. Many of the people have been identified, and some of them I have known personally, whether they were nurses, doctors, patients in the hospital, or even women and children who were residents of the ground in Nasser Hospital there. At the same time, many bodies there have been found but have not been identified yet because their limbs have been cut, their heads are not there anymore. Many of them have lost their organs and then zipped up again. It is horrendous. It is surreal that after over 200 days, we are still talking about investigations and forensic studies where we all know who the perpetrator of these war crimes are. And to be honest, I don't know for how long the world can stay silent regarding what is happening right now. In addition to this mass grave in Nasser Hospital, let me remind the viewers that there are tens of thousands of those not only that have been killed and injured, but those who we do not know where they are. So we are feared of seeing so many other mass graves similar to this one. And what a shame that the international community is still quiet and is still not doing anything to stop these genocide attempts against the Palestinian people in Gaza.
Kenneth, Gaza is a war zone. How is it possible to go about gathering evidence when this kind of conflict is going on and so much evidence can and is being destroyed?
Well, I think what you speak to is, first of all, the importance of physical presence. And the Israeli government has blocked physical presence, both by foreign journalists, but also by human rights defenders. And perhaps, most important, because here we're speaking about accountability, they have refused access to investigators from the International Criminal Court, the international body that has jurisdiction over war crimes in Gaza and could very well prosecute the perpetrators here. So it's not impossible to do an investigation in the middle of a war. I mean, this would require, simply cooperation by the both sides. I'm sure that, Hamas would give safe passage. The real question is, would Israel? But Israel doesn't want to give safe passage. It doesn't want to allow these kind of independent investigations. It just wants to kind of sweep the issue under the rug, or maybe it'll do what it usually does, which is to say, we're going to investigate ourselves, which typically results in either we never hear anything again or a whitewash. And I think it's, that whitewashing, which is why both the United Nations and the European Union have stressed the importance of an independent investigation. That means not an Israeli self-investigation. Now, the US government hasn't yet gone that far. They have sought a thorough and transparent investigation, but they didn't use the magic word, an independent investigation. But that's what we need. We need somebody other than the Israelis to look at this, and we need access sooner rather than later because, bodies decompose and it's more difficult over time to figure out exactly what happened.
Andreas, when it comes to mass grave sites and investigating and preserving forensic evidence, how crucial is it that professional forensic experts with the right kind of equipment, with the needed resources, that they're able to access those sites as quickly as possible so that the sites aren't contaminated?
Yes, thank you indeed. It's absolutely critical that proper forensic investigations are carried out. This entails employing forensic archaeologists and anthropologists. It is likewise critical these investigations are conducted in an official framework. So the question that immediately imposes itself, who can mandate effectively an independent investigation? Now we know that steps have been taken by the United Nations, so potentially that would provide a framework if an invitation is extended to an international organization that can assist in such investigations. Now, we've heard already that identifications of victims are taking place. That is presumably done not necessarily employing scientific means, which incurs certain risks. So these identifications will probably have to be confirmed. That should also be included. So to point to to previous experience, of course, the International Commission on Missing Persons, ICMP, has been extensively assisting with excavations, mass grave examinations, recovering victims, and identifying remains in support of the domestic and also international authorities, also in the context of criminal investigations, in particular in the former Yugoslavia. What is critical to keep in mind is that all investigations should be done with a view of collecting evidence to a standard that will hold up in a court of law. It is clear that alleged perpetrators have a different a narrative of mass graves than the public or witnesses will present. And to have a convincing account, provide irrefutable evidence of what happened, it is important to have experts of a high caliber involved.
Mansour, you spoke earlier about the frustration when it comes to hearing international actors and rights bodies call for investigations, and yet still atrocities are happening. I want to ask you about the fact that after the discovery of this latest mass grave, there are more calls. There are calls from the EU and the UN for an independent investigation. You have the US calling for a transparent investigation, but they're not going as far as calling for an independent investigation. Do you think there will be sufficient international pressure now that this could actually happen, or will it be more of the same?
Unfortunately, I think the way the laws are set up in the world right now, especially on the international stage, is that the support and the one who is right is the one who is strong, the one who has the power. And right now, the veto power right now is in the hands of the US and allies of the Zionist state. Unfortunately, I do not have a lot of confidence that the international agencies can do anything. I remember when I was in Nasser Hospital, together with tens of thousands of others of refugees in the hospital and in the schools around us, we were told by these international agencies that we were in a safe place, we were in a safe zone, that the IDF will not attack, and that we have nothing to worry, we have nothing to fear. However, on one morning, the IDF came in with their trucks, with their forklifts, with their tanks, with their soldiers, and attacked the people inside the schools, inside the Nasser Hospital, and forced people like myself to flee. And in addition to that, it took with it hundreds of lives. It's like we're talking about two different parallel worlds here. You're talking about a world where theory and human rights talk about what should and will happen, but the reality is that what is happening right now cannot wait for these international agencies to talk to us about what should happen, because time is running out. Time is running out. And what has happened in Nasser Hospital now is going to happen soon in Rafah, in the hospitals there, to the people there. And the blood of these people will be stained on these international organization reputations and these countries around the world claiming human rights and democracies forever. What is happening right now will be a stain on everyone right now who is calling for the right thing to be done, but is not doing it. We need action. Enough words. We need action on the ground right now.
Kenneth, I saw you reacting there to what Mansour was saying. He's talking about the fact that he, along with others, were housing themselves in these medical complexes that are supposed to be protected under international humanitarian law. And yet, time and again, we've seen these hospitals and medical complexes come under siege in Gaza. Will these words translate into action? Will Israel be held to account for this? What needs to happen for this to stop?
Well, first, on the point of the hospitals, I mean, the hospitals are presumptively protected. They can lose their protected status if the other side uses them for military purposes. Now, Israel has, a history here of saying that Hamas, for example, was supposed to have a major command center under Al Shifa Hospital. And that was going to justify Israel going in and, basically occupying the biggest hospital in Gaza at a point of acute need, at a point where people are being bombed every day. This is exactly when you need a hospital. And Israel took it over, evacuated the patients. And that was the first time. There have been two takeovers in Al Shifa. But, when they, at the end of that, to show this supposed command center, what did they show us? A handful of rifles, a little bit of military equipment, one tunnel that a former Israeli prime minister said, actually, we, the Israelis, built back when we controlled Gaza City. So, they've been very unsuccessful in demonstrating the military justification for taking over these hospitals. And in a sense, what you see is they seem to be weaponizing Palestinians' need for healthcare at a moment of acute need by depriving them, of the physical facilities. I mean, now I think the WHO says 10 out of the 36 hospitals are minimally functioning. Israel has been blockading, really preventing much of the necessary medical equipment from coming in. So, this is a direct assault on the Palestinian civilian population. Now, the good question is, well, what can we do about this? And let's talk about, both the International Criminal Court and the U.S. government, because I think these are parallel processes. The International Criminal Court, it is difficult at this moment. It doesn't have permission to go into Gaza. So something, like a mass grave, which really does require a forensic investigation, as we've just heard, it's going to be hard for it to do that. But there are major war crimes where the International Criminal Court already has the evidence. One, which is not even about Gaza, is the settlements. The settlements are a war crime. They're a violation of Article 49 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, which prohibits an occupying power from sending its population into occupied territory. Karim Khan, the chief prosecutor, has that evidence. The people ordering the settlements are going up to the top. He hasn't done anything. The other thing that he has, he's talked repeatedly about this, he has the evidence that Israel is blocking food, its starvation strategy. He doesn't need, more evidence from inside Gaza. He has that. He's threatened to act on it, but he hasn't.
Andreas, let me ask you to follow up on a point that Kenneth was making there, because I saw you reacting to some of what he was saying. When it comes to these issues of international justice, without an independent investigation taking place, can the discovery of, let's say, this latest mass grave, can that be added to some of these forums where cases may be happening? Like, let's say, the International Court of Justice, the case that South Africa brought against Israel accusing it of genocide in Gaza, or if the ICC were to take up the case and get involved later?
From our experience, also going back to the former Yugoslavia and the trials that took place in The Hague, including the trials of Mr. Mladic and Dr. Karadzic concerning crimes in and around Srebrenica. It is crucial to be able to provide evidence of the circumstances of the establishment of these mass graves, of who is in these mass graves, of evidence of crimes, including trauma. So it takes anthropological examinations of the remains. Otherwise, it is perfectly possible for alleged perpetrators to claim that mass graves are in fact, and that exists too, legitimate, in the sense that remains found in these mass graves, died of various causes, died in combat, were brought to two hospital locations where they eventually died. And mass graves can be legitimately used for purposes of a dignified treatment of human remains on a temporary basis until proper rituals and commemorations can be carried out. All of these arguments have been made in trials before the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, and needed to be refuted with strong and clear evidence.
Mansour, if I could ask you more of a personal question. You talked about your experience there at Nasser Hospital and those whom you know who have been there. When it comes to making the choice to try and take refuge at a site where people are being told that it is protected, and yet the fear is that it will not be protected, that it will be attacked, what is that choice like for Palestinians in Gaza who want to just protect themselves and their family members?
I think the Palestinians in Gaza right now believe they don't have a choice. They never did have a choice before the Nasser Hospital raid or after it. They're just trying to seek refuge wherever they can, away from the IDF and its genocide attempt. Please remember that drones is always hovering over them 24/7, in kind of a psychological warfare. in addition to the expectation that at any moment they can be targeted, their loved ones can be targeted, they can lose further things that they have owned, whether it be tangible or intangible. I mean, we're talking about the physical impact in Gaza, but later on we are going to be starting to measure the mental impact, the trauma impact. And I think that the time for investigation and looking into who is perpetrating I think we're all done with this. Right now we're talking about taking action. And a big salutation to the tens of thousands of students across the world, especially in the United States universities, who are taking on their campuses, saying that, it's time to free Palestine. It's time to ensure that Gaza has a permanent ceasefire and that aid reaches the people there. The politicians and those in power need to listen to this generation that is now looking at things from an impartial view, seeing the evidence firsthand being sent live on television, on different social media platforms. The Palestinians on the ground will stay steadfast. They know that they are on the right side of history. They do not want a repeat of 1948 and 1967. And they cannot do that without the support of people like here at Al Jazeera, trying to show the news, people around the world demonstrating, continuing to boycott, continuing to lobby their politicians. It's important that everyone continues to do that, because all of that results in a positive impact on the people on the ground in Palestine, who continue to try to hear the news, try to get the aid that is reaching them in trickles. I was talking to a friend who is in Khan Yunis, and he was telling me about his brother that was in one of these mass graves. And he said that, Mansour, despite us seeing all of this, at least I know that I've seen my brother. I've seen him in his flesh, and I know what happened to him. Hopefully he's in a better place in paradise. But think about the thousands who still don't know the fate of their loved ones. Again, people in Gaza are looking for action. So we are asking those international organizations, we are asking the UN, the ICJ, to do right now what Palestinians need. Put an end to this war, make a permanent ceasefire, ensure there's a no-fly zone above Palestine, announce a free Palestinian state, and make sure that aid reaches 2.3 million Palestinians that need it right now.
Kenneth, I saw you reacting to some of what Mansour was saying there. It looked like you wanted to jump in, so please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we're focusing most of this show on the justice, the accountability question, which it's important. And obviously, if Karim Khan were to charge, Netanyahu, for example, that would be a big deterrent for these kinds of war crimes. But, I think Mansour is absolutely right that the real issue here is stopping the killing. How do you stop the bombardment of civilians? How do you stop the starvation of civilians? And, the one person in the world who really has the capacity to exert sufficient pressure on Netanyahu is Joe Biden. And, we saw that even when he sort of vaguely threatened to condition U.S. aid if Netanyahu didn't allow in more food, suddenly a little bit more food was allowed in. But Biden has not really been willing to exert that linkage. He hasn't been willing to say, I'm going to stop arming and funding your war crimes until they stop, period. And, he at this point is still discussing with Netanyahu, how do you attack Rafah? How do you move 1.4 million people to a beachfront that is utterly unprepared to receive them, and where, given history, Israel would just bomb them anyhow. So, what we really need is Biden to pressure Netanyahu. And Biden's only going to do that if he sees a real political cost for his current arming and complicity in this war crimes. And so that's why the protests in the United States really matter. Biden has an election coming up. He does have to care about public opinion, and public opinion is very rapidly souring on Biden's complicity in these war crimes.
Andreas, we don't have a whole lot of time left, but it looked like you were reacting to what Kenneth was saying there, so I want to give you a chance to jump in if you wanted to.
ICMP, the International Commission on Missing Persons, has made it very clear that it stands ready to assist mass graves in the investigation at the request of authorities. And that move will, of course, have to have the backing of the United Nations. It will have to have the backing of the parties. We fully understand that there are big question marks whether the parties will be willing to permit a forensic investigation on the ground. I would want to, however, underline, as was said earlier, that it is not excluded carrying out such an independent investigation in the short term if conditions, and in particular the participation or the permission of the parties is present. I think that's to be kept in mind. And while I fully understand, and it's absolutely understandable to see disappointment with international organizations in particular, one has to keep in mind that international organizations do depend on the willingness of parties to cooperate.
Mansour, despite where things stand right now, despite how dire the situation is in Gaza, are you hopeful that eventually there will be accountability? Do you think that there will be sufficient pressure on Israel that in the long term there will be accountability?
100%, 100%. I am hopeful, together with all other Palestinians and those who love freedom around the world. History repeats itself. Look what happened in South Africa. Something similar is going to happen here in Gaza and Palestine. It's just a matter of time. I think slowly international pressure, if you look at the macro politics, it's changing. If you look at the moods of the people, it's changing. If you look at the media covering, it's changing. So I think it will happen. It's just a matter of time. But the question is, how much more will the Palestinians in Gaza need to suffer before this time comes in? And I hope not any more time.
All right. Well, we have run out of time, so we're going to have to leave the conversation there. Thanks so much to all of our guests today, Mansour Shouman, Andreas Kleiser, and Kenneth Roth. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Mohammed Jamjoom, and the entire team here. Bye for now.